So what I wanted to talk about a bit today was thinking about circular economy in Devon. And I must say now that perhaps my language and thinking is a bit different from Claire. And I guess this is sort of what comes from being in academia maybe and being able to think broadly about ideas. So what we've been thinking about within the project is towards diverse and equitable economies. So I'll touch a bit on the circular economy and hopefully look at some examples. I've turned the chat off from my end, so if people have clarifying questions, you can do that at the end, but I won't be able to see what's coming through as I'm speaking. So really, I won't talk much about the problems we're facing. I think we all sort of know about that, but I will say sort of in relation to resources and consumption, we know that has doubled since 1970 and continues to rise. So despite all the talk about the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, pollution and unsustainability, that's continuing to grow. And we know that growth is linked very much to climate change. We know wealthy nations like our own are more of a cause of that than poorer nations. And we know that we need to really be looking towards sustainable prosperity, economies that are low carbon, equitable and regenerative. And so I guess here, sort of putting out some different ideas, perhaps to Claire, in looking more at sort of post-growth ideas, or at least diverse economies, when sort of think about how the circular economy might fit in. So this slide is a bit busy, but trying to get over what we sort of think about the circular economy and how we sort of shift away from what we're in at the moment, which we refer to as the extractive linear economy, because it's based very much on the extraction of resources or exploitation of natural resources, the consumption, sort of making things, using them, and then the disposal. And this leads very much to, relatively speaking, cheap goods, because the extraction side and the disposal side is not really accounted for in the cost of those goods. So this leads to a sort of growth model that is very much based on taking and then throwing away without really having to account for those costs. We also know that at the moment, very few of those resources are ever recovered and recycled. So most ends up is either waste to energy for incineration, or landfill or other. So we know that a lot of that also ends up in places like the sea. And one of our main emphasis has been on the plastics circular economy. So that has been very much looking at microplastics and plastic pollution. So we know that this move has got to take place, this transition to, on the right-hand side, the regenerative circular economy, which is really about trying to keep resources in use. So we've got through reclaiming, but I think that should be really one of the last resorts. Really, it's about reducing, reusing, repairing, repurposing, sharing. So it's shifting the economy, shifting how we think about how we use resources. And I know that a lot of places think about this within sort of reducing waste or reducing rubbish. But I think we also need to think of this as about creating new resources and new opportunities. So Circle Economy, who are based in the Netherlands, have looked at lots of different initiatives, and they've put together their core elements, which is prioritising regenerative resources, and that's from energy through to the design of products that can be reused or are made to be repaired, stretching the lifetime, again talking about repair, repurposing, think about waste as a resource that can be used multiple times in different ways, and rethinking the business model, which has been quite central to a lot of our thinking, which may well be about, I think, a lot of products are coming online that are thinking about mending. So building mend into the sale of goods. So clothes, for instance, there's some companies now that are giving repair kits or doing in-shop repairs, designed for the future, again, designed for repair, and teaming up and creating joint value. And I think in a lot of our work, we've seen how good networks are and how important they are. And that's for the last thing, which was sharing knowledge. So this is just sort of an overview of the circular economy. I think where a lot of problems happen with the circular economy, where I find quite uncomfortable with a lot of circular narratives, is it becomes very focused on one material and one closed loop. And it's been very much used in a lot of greenwashing. So we see a lot of big companies coming forward and saying how circular their processes are. But within this research project, looking at the social side, it's been very much about people and where the social fits into this and where it can feed back into more regenerative social circles. And again, central to our thinking and problems with the broad narratives of the circular economy is that idea of equity. How do we make this equitable? We can't have the one size fits all, and there seems to be an assumption in a lot of circular economy narratives that you're coming up with something alternative that is greener, low carbon or lower carbon, and that will fit all, that will suit all people. But I think with equity, we're thinking about participation, what suits people, what is context sensitive. And our researchers looked at the region, Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, and going down from regional to local to hyper-local, because that will be different. Participation needs are different everywhere, circular needs are different everywhere, and the benefits and the opportunities will be different everywhere. So I'd like to just say a bit about how we've been looking at circular economies in the Southwest, and we've used Gibbs and Graham's iceberg as a benchmark to think about diverse circular economies. So not thinking about one overarching economy and trying to get past the different binaries of how the economy is looked at. So Gibbs and Graham's iceberg is very much, and this is their iceberg rather than my own iceberg, is really important thinking about the economy. So they see this sort of what might think of as the capital-driven economy, or normative economy, perhaps, as that bit of the iceberg that sticks out at the top, the bit that gets seen, the bit that usually gets counted as the economy. So the wage, labour, products, and growth, the growth model. But underneath that, and as we know as icebergs, the majority of the iceberg is under the water, it's all the other processes, all the other points of exchange and transactions that go on that don't fit into that, that don't get seen. And we know that these are particularly done by women, disproportionately do a large amount of sort of unpaid economic work. But these are what drives different parts of what we see as the broader economy. So we've taken that forward to think about how we might sort of look at diverse circular economies in our study in the Southwest. So in the table, we've got the different things that we came up from workshops and different ways of engaging with different groups across Cornwall, Devon and Somerset. And this is just looking at plastics, and this is just some examples of the different activities and initiatives that were happening across the Southwest. So jotting them down, we could see that these weren't just sort of one size fits all. There's a really diverse and really vibrant amount of initiatives going on, but they don't fit into that top bit of the iceberg. So we need to think of them differently. And I think by doing this and having a look at that, the wider, the bigger part of the iceberg, if you like, is a really good way of seeing where the potential lies in the southwest, or more generally. And I think this hopefully links up to what a lot of the donut collective will be talking about. So this is one where we've been looking at it, which sort of broadens it out, I think, from some of the narratives around the circular economy.
Kerry, just to say maybe one more minute.
Okay, so last slide. So some of the examples, they're not all based down here. We can always talk about these in the questions. So we've got some national schemes like Warpit, which councils and large institutions can use to exchange goods. So if you're finished with some office equipment, you can exchange it through Warpit or loan it. Some things I found interesting, the co-cars, the idea of sharing, moving away from individual ownership, and again, sharing libraries. We don't all need to own a drill. We just need the drill for the service it provides, and that can enhance equity, can enhance access to goods, access to the services they provide. In the middle, we got an underpass that was turned into, so we think about reusing space, turned into a playground and planted up. And we've got housing, thinking of housing differently. The Lilac scheme in Leeds, which is based on a different form of ownership. And as you can see up in the top corner, the cars are away from the houses, which isn't the normal model in this country. And we've got the Restart project, which is with repair cafes, but also mapping repair businesses, independent repair businesses, so that people can find out where they are and get repairs done. And work hubs, rural work hubs fit into circular economy by reducing the need to use resources to travel. And the small one is the triangles are from the 15-minute city idea, and reprioritizing active travel, closeness, and independence. So I'll finish it there, but I'm sure there'll be lots more discussion in the questions.
Oh, thank you, Kerry. Yes, and just to say, the examples will really find their place in the first round of breakout. So it'd be great to have you there and elaborate on those you've just shared and add more. Just wondering whether there's any clarifying questions that we would like to pose to Kerry at this point in time. Maybe we're just good and we can continue, but I think the chat has been very lively and people have been contributing local ideas. And one of the things that I'm taking out from what you've said, and you mentioned it already, as Co-Cars, as an organization that is, of course, aiming for zero carbon with their vehicles that are electric, but their actual mission is shared mobility for all. So they've got a very strong social ethos, and it's a real example where green and inclusivity can go together. I mean, I'm slightly biased, it's in essence member of, but just to say that we are having really good examples in the Southwest. Where it is happening, where we marry those two components of enterprise. I am thinking we will leave it with this. Thanks very much, Kerry, for that contribution. And